In this episode, let's recap our season's conversations and our takeaways.
This is The Hidden Critique, where we discuss art, race, and higher education at the intersection of an MFA. I'm Marlon Tobias, pronouns he, him.
And I'm Krystle and Lemonias, pronouns she, her.
Welcome to our show.
Okay, so we have had quite an eventful and thought-provoking season. What do you say, Chris?
I would certainly agree. We had the opportunity to really wrestle with some strategies that individuals are using to make work, be productive in their studios, have discoveries and such.
Yeah, and what I also love is that, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but really get a clearer picture of the ecosystem of the art industry with a lot of the artists or a lot of the guests that we talked with and how they are working within that ecosystem.
I would agree, but I think to add to that, I would also preface that we are so fascinated by how they're balancing these two things, keeping a very active and innovative art practice that consistently stays in this place of discovery while engaging in this industry that, they're still trying to make a living. So it's quite a balance.
Quite a balance, yeah. But before we get into the nitty gritty, even though this is the end of season review, got to do that check-in.
Mm-hmm.
So, how is your heart, Chris?
Oh Lordy, today is the day in our Lord March 5th, 2025, and it is off the back of many active days in our political space. And so that said, my heart is turbulent. To be honest, and I laugh with an anxious feel. It's turbulent. It's turbulent because it's filled with uncertainty. However, trying to fight against the feeling of turbulence to see where I can be useful in my home space, in my work both as an artist and as an art educator, and in my community, the people that I spend time with and those that are going to be immediately affected by all these swooping changes that are consistently being thrown across all about the place. Yeah. And how about you, my dear Marlon? How is your heart?
My heart is persevering, but my body is going through it. I'm sure that you can tell I sound a little bit nasally. I am fighting a little bit of a cold because of the season changing, and at this point of the semester, things are kind of getting a little bit busy. So we're kind of at the climax of the semester as we taper down and gear up towards the last half of the semester.
Yeah.
So my body is kind of responding to that.
Mm-hmm,
But I am in the spirit of perseverance in many aspects of life, and this too shall pass is the theme of my day right now.
Yes.
Shall pass. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about what are some of the takeaways or some of the things that we learned from all the guests that we've invited on the show this season. I think the first theme that really sticks out for me is that it takes time. And that resonates with me deeply because though I always thought of myself as a creative person, I'm still very early in my art career. And for me, being a little bit of being a Sagittarius, I can be a little bit impatient. So I need those reminders that this takes time. And I'm so grateful that we got to talk with a lot of artists that have been in this game for decades and that have meticulously and thoughtfully been working at it and carving away at their career to make it what it is today. So this is not an overnight thing, is what I was reminded of.
Yeah, I would say that my takeaway in that space of it taking time, I thought personally about the discoveries that you are chipping away at in your studio. I think that it was really evident in our conversation with both Deborah, Jack, Shoshana Weinberg, as well as Tenjin, how their material discoveries, and I would beg to differ also, Alana Clark, their material discoveries really, really honed in on how these other parts our interests academically, like the things that they enjoy learning. I shouldn't even say academically, but what they enjoy learning, how that creeped into their studio and created this innovative directional change in how they showed up in their making practice. I was really inspired by that, and really thought to myself, where could I take such inspiration, and what am I enjoying learning about now, and how that can show up in a thoughtful way in my work.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess just moving forward, thinking about being in that place of pivoting, right? And kind of being uncomfortable or being comfortable being uncomfortable. Because I also think about Irvin Johnson and how he's in a place where when we talk to him, where he had to restructure some of the things in his art practice in order to kind of adapt to his current needs, right? And that also speaks to just how you have to be nimble as well, right? And sometimes you have to slow some things down in order to rev things back up. And that's something that I really appreciate Irvin being transparent and sharing and vulnerable with that.
I would also add that being perceptive is very important in this
Mm,
space as well. We also noted how perceptive he was with the changes in his particular life, this personal loss of his mom, and then what grew out of that pain that he was experiencing, that
definitely.
impactful work that he was really proud of, and has taken his work in a bit of a different direction at this moment in time.
Yeah, definitely. And through that, being perceptive and being nimble, another great takeaway that I gathered from this season, from the guests that we talked to, is that achievement and success comes differently for everyone. Um,
I take a deep breath right there, because we often, Instagram and all these social media spaces lets us focus in on what is the success of others around us. And if you're an artist, you probably have a whole bunch of other artists on your page. And so seeing that they won this particular award, they got this particular grant, you're like, oh my God, I'm not doing anything. I haven't won these things. And really kind of taking a step back and looking inward as to what does success looks like for you, and maybe success looks like just making a body of work that you truly just feel proud of, and that might be the stepping stone to gaining support in order to potentially get that award, or do some sort of workshop in your community.
yeah, one artist that definitely sticks out when thinking about that theme of success looking differently was definitely Alicia Brown. Her story is, especially her coming from another country and navigating that experience and that process, really shows how unlinear art or to build this career can be, but still very successful and sustainable.
Certainly, because not only did she overcome the upheaval of immigrating from Jamaica, we are fellow Jamaicans,
Hmm.
but really had to find her voice in her particular medium, which is painting, as a oil painter, where she kind of focused in on in some ways a very romantic conceptual approach in painting. She had to find why she was doing what she was doing, and then how to make that particular practice and carve out the space in this medium that, of course, is overrun right now. There's so many painters working in oil paint. And so creating a very distinct voice is challenging, but she did that. She really carved out a space for herself.
Alicia
Absolutely.
Brown is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. As a working artist, you likely are to be an agitator and or an innovator. And I see that so many of our guests this season showcased one or the other or both.
Especially Deborah, right?
Yeah. What were your thoughts on Deborah?
There's one quote that she stated, and she was like, I never thought of myself as a margin. And just for her to navigate the world with that perspective is inherently to take the stance as an agitator against the systems at hand, right?
Mhm.
And it provides you the space and it gives you the agency to be an innovator in what you're doing. When she said that, everything about our conversation with her just made sense.
Mhm.
And it was also very empowering, but it can also be kind of like a scary place to say that to yourself and walk in that I am not on the margins, right?
I do think as an artist coming from the global south, you have to move in spaces with a bit of audacity. And I think all these artists and individuals we brought on this season really showcase innovation and agitation with audacity. So what are your thoughts on innovators in this season?
Well, I'm just thinking about discipline, right?
Mhm.
In order to be an innovator, you have to be disciplined to consistently show up to the studio and constantly be open to discovering new things and not confining yourself to older practices, right?
Mhm.
Not limiting yourself, constantly being curious, constantly exploring, and leaving yourself open for those things.
Yeah, I think specifically what Anna mentioned is just her move from I think she was a figurative painter, if my memory serves me correct. Yes, she worked in figuration and then
Anna? Oh,
she
yeah, she did start with figurative, yeah.
yeah, she worked in figuration and then she moved into the space of abstraction, and what opportunities she found from that shift by building her own visual language within painting. I found that so impressive. And then to also note Alana Clark's interest in being a performance artist and how that also connected with dance, and then her use of these varied materials to really show their intersection of that place and talk about her identity and its, I guess, interaction with community and viewership and voyeurism and a bunch of other things. But photography and performance art being this really major role in her practice, but then she has found these very unique ways and materials to broaden the discussion of these things.
I was actually just thinking about how that concept of performing and playing an active role showed up in her personal life and how it manifested in her interest in agriculture and community, and how she is playing an active role in building that community in Detroit where she currently resides, and that understanding of you having to play a part in all of this and be active in all of this. So I just see that how those two things in her life are so interwoven and correlated. And it's also just making me also challenged. How do I actively engage with my communities through the lessons that I'm learning through my art practice, right? And how do I make that seamless thread through my art practice and into my personal life as well? to just kind of make myself an overall stronger person.
Yeah, I think what we can take away from that is one, we have this podcast environment that has given us a reason to have these conversations with these artists that we tangentially know, whether like we have these very small connections through various events and experiences and social activities, but we've created a space to have this very thoughtful and intimate conversation about their art practice, and they have been, I would say, quite vulnerable in what they'd like to share about how they've gotten to where they are, what are the things that they currently value, and how they're navigating in their art career. And so I think this is an act of community building, this podcast itself. And two,
I receive that.
yes, receive it. And two, I think this practice that we are making of reaching out to people that we intend to build some sort of rapport with stems from our previous experiences of doing this in grad school, and increased that commitment in this way. And I'm hopeful that we'll find ways to increase it even that much more in the future. I envision workshops and such. Again, foreshadowing, but
yes.
but I think at this moment in time, based on our bandwidth, this is what we currently can do, and it is an act of community building, I would certainly say.
I love that. Thank you for that reminder. Because, when you're in the trenches, and I think this speaks to all the guests that we talked to, in particular the artists, because we had some guests that are on like the art administration side this season. But, when you're in the trenches, sometimes you need that reminder of just like you're doing the work.
Absolutely. And as
you're doing all the work, actually.
Yes. And as you mentioned, art administrators, the art world is an interconnected ecosystem of individuals working with different intersections that inform each other. And we specifically had Albert Whitley, a design leader and art collector, as well as gallery director Janelle Dawson. Would you like to share a little bit of your takeaways from those conversations?
I think those conversations were essential for artists to hear art administrators' side of the art world, right? And what they're looking for and how they're viewing artists, right? In their careers, and how they also assist with art careers, and also certain ideas that they have. Because one thing that Albert touched on, and I would love to continue a conversation with, manifesting hopefully, is his interest in being an art advisor, which I equated in my head to like somewhat of like a manager role. If this was like the music industry, to help kind of guide you and break down for you what would be the best steps to take in order to grow your career, which I think a lot of artists need to be aware that there are people out there that want to do that for you
or with you. Co-collaboration. Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah, I would also add that, understanding the variety of resources that is at your disposal to make your ideas come to fruition is very important. And that is what these two individuals brought to the conversation. In many of the other conversations with artists, we learned so much about their art practice specifically. And then with these two conversations, we learned, like you said, one side art advisory and this other contrasting system of artist representation. And in those two spaces, they kind of have different goals, similar objectives, and serve different purposes or routes of success for the artist. And so learning how you can make the choice of what works best for your particular interesting career development is important. And I do think having a vision already, kind of utilizing resource to develop that vision of what you want to do, makes your interaction with either one, art representation with a gallery, dealing with a gallery director, this is commercially, as well as art advisor, which also works commercially. However, does things a little bit differently, which we discussed in both episodes. I think there's so much value in having a full distinction of these spaces and how you will intend to engage.
And understanding the full distinction, because what I'm so grateful about Janal is that she opened the door to provide us more insight to how to engage with galleries. Because I know, especially with a lot of emerging artists or burgeoning artists, engaging with galleries can be a little intimidating, right? And sometimes there's no clear answer onto how to appropriately engage with galleries to let them know that you are a serious artist who is interested in making a serious career out of this, right? So having her also be open to talking with us, I would hope would provided a lot more clarity for artists on how to interact with galleries and how to kind of build your, I'll say, portfolio to show them what they bring to the table.
Absolutely. And I feel like that truly summarized the season and so much of our takeaways. There is so much more, but those are the major highlights, I would add. I think for me going forward, I'm thinking about season 3, which is on deck, and thinking, one thing, what I didn't mention, which I think is super important as a takeaway in this season, is our experience of learning about historical figures in art.
Yeah, I was going to say that should be the theme of that's the new theme of the country, right? Like knowing history. You need to know your
history. Boy, oh boy. Does the past write the future? I would say yes, in many respects. And I think having the opportunity to have a conversation with someone that is actively archiving their family's contribution to art history, T. Collins, and with the work of Dr. Barbara Collins, who is his daughter, and their entire family, but then also seeing the research, the book that was recently written by my colleague Robbie Gilbert.
What I also look forward for season 3 is hopefully having more conversations with them, and more opportunities to put the story of T. Collins on different platforms and the awareness to different places. Hopefully more conferences and more live recordings so we can be together.
Absolutely. That was super sweet. We had the opportunity to see each other after actually not seeing each other since graduation, all together. Right?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. That was
because we got to bring our editor, Kirsten, who I don't think we talk about her enough, and we praise her enough for the work that she does. So Kirsten, thank you so much, and thank you for coming on this journey with us and making the Hidden Critique what it is. And yeah, that was just a really great experience. And I'm glad that we were all able to come together physically to be a part of that.
Absolutely. And so I would like to close in the spirit of gratitude, as you've just started, Marlon, thanking all the guests for showing up and having these intimate conversations about their art practice and their art careers this season and the work that they do that is art adjacent. I would also, again, like to thank Kirsten for her editing work. I would also like to thank Marlon for being the best co-host. Pew, pew, pew. I appreciate our friendship and even that much more our working collaboration in creating a shared vision of what does art, education, the landscape of it look like as we re-envision, we make it more equitable and make spaces that we can all thrive.
That was beautiful. That was great. And I thank you too as well, Chris, for giving me the opportunity as well to show what I'm made of and
Aw.
trusting me throughout this journey as well. So I thank you for that. And being a wonderful co-host who, like you said, has a shared vision, but also challenges me. And hopefully I challenge you to think in other ways or from other perspectives as well. And with that, we will see you guys next school year for season 3.
Yes, and signing out. Thank you for listening to our episode. The Hidden Critique is produced and hosted by us, Krystle and Lemonias and Marlon Tobias. Episodes are edited by Kirsten Pettifor. Original music composed by Cesar Presa.
If you like the show, you can review and rate this podcast via Spotify. You can also like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube page.
For exclusive bonus content, subscribe to our Patreon at The Hidden Critique.